Welcome to the Fort Collins Fellows podcast. From Colorado State University to New Belgium Brewery and the hundreds of miles of hiking and biking trails, Fort Collins has earned its well-deserved reputation as one of the top places to live in the United States. Your hosts, Patrick and Chris, were born and raised in Fort Collins. Patrick owns and runs Soukup Real Estate Services, a top-rated real estate brokerage company here in Fort Collins. Chris is the co-owner of the Murphy Whitlock Group, a top-rated residential mortgage broker based out of Fort Collins. Now join the fellas as they uncover the stories, places, and people that make Fort Collins so exceptional.
Well, welcome everybody back to the Fort Collins Fellows podcast. My name is Chris Murphy. With me, as always, is Patrick Soukup. Although we had done a couple of episodes by ourselves, so we've rolled solo once or twice. But I am thrilled to welcome a good friend of my wife and I's. We've known him for many years, and we've been trying to get him on the podcast for a while, and we finally got him. Let me do a proper intro for Mr. Don Overcash. But started his career in the pharmaceutical business. You got your bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois of Chicago. Went on to get your MBA at Keller Graduate School of Management. I got to know you back in 2017 and met you when you were at Sandler Training Institute, where you're a sales coach. And, we've had a lot of conversations about that. Don, you've been on the board of directors for the Loveland Chamber of Commerce. You were a city councilman in Loveland. You were the mayor pro tem from 2015 to 2023. You're currently the president of Overcash Consulting. Don, you got like 20 other things on your LinkedIn profile I won't even get into, but we are thrilled to have you on the podcast. Thank you, sir.
Good. Well, thank you, Chris and Patrick.
Perfect. Well, we were just chatting before we started recording. There is a number of topics that we want to dive into. And I kind of want to start with your experience with Loveland. And for those that obviously know, most of the people that watch this podcast know Fort Collins and Loveland are right there next to each other. But, I want you to do just an intro to our guests and our listeners about your kind of journey and how you ended up in Loveland, Colorado. Then we'll get into your experiences when you were running for mayor. You got a lot of things to say about the budget and everything like that. We got the Fort Collins Loveland Airport. There's a number of topics. But Don, why don't you just introduce yourselves to our listeners and tell your story, how you came to Loveland and into Northern Colorado.
Well, thank you, Chris. When people ask, how did you end up in Loveland? I actually do kind of have to laugh because my wife and I had made a commitment a number of years ago, back in the 90s, that I was going to continue working in the corporate arena in the healthcare industry until the kids got to college. And then I was going to walk away from being on an airplane 2 to 3, 4 times a week, being in hotels 2, 3 times a week, and get a life back where I could live, work, play, worship in one community predictably every night. And when the kids did get out of high school and both entered college, we looked at each other and said, time now to make a move. And we looked at a number of options. We had vacation in Colorado, and we found Loveland to be a place that we thought we could reestablish a new career and pick up life and live life and retire in the same community that we had been working in for a good number of years. And here we are. We moved out here in 2006.
Okay. And then you started with Sandler in 2009. Is that right?
Yeah, I continued to work in the corporate area. I was president and CEO of a healthcare communications company. It was like the third or fourth one that I had been running over the years. And I worked for an additional year, then stepped away and did an official retirement that lasted about 6 months.
I was going to say, you're never going to retire. You're never going to retire.
Well, it was really interesting. My wife and I were in Panera down here in Centera. It's right across the street from where the Starbucks is, and now we have Chick-fil-A there, and we also have In-N-Out Burger.
In-N-Out Burger, yeah.
It's quite the location. But we had stopped in there for coffee one morning, and I get one of those elbow jabs from my wife, and I'm, this year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And so I was already pretty experienced at that little elbow jab, was my initial reaction was normal. I'm sorry, what did I do? Thinking I stepped on somebody, I wasn't moving quick enough or something like that, And she said, no, look, there's a Sandler guy. And I had been a client of Sandler training since around 1996. And so this is like 10 years. And I'd really found the principles taught in the organization to be really exceptional. And so I made contact with this gentleman. We talking to him because he had a Sandler shirt on, the logo thing we all wear. And within 6 months, I had joined John Guyman as a principal and a partner here in Loveland, Colorado, and continued to work there until I think 2022.
Yep, that's awesome.
So that's kind of brings us up to at least through the work stuff.
No, I love it. Well, let's dive right into I door knocked for you. I was a door knock for you back when you were running for mayor and city council and everything like that. Let's kind of start this. We mentioned you were the mayor pro temp for 2015, 2023. We're going to talk about the budget. There's some things we're going to talk about, but bring us behind the scenes. Like, what is that like? We don't talk a lot about politics here on this podcast, but it is an election year. You are in that room with the mayor, and it's a much different makeup than Fort Collins City Council. I think we can all agree. But Don, let's just start there. Like, let's start with your experience in that room. And I mean, you were a part of a lot of decisions over those almost 10 years in Loveland, and those decisions affect Fort Collins, and those Fort Collins decisions affect Loveland. So let's talk a little bit about that, Don.
Well, I chose city council. I was elected as a representative from Ward 4. There's 4 wards in Loveland, and I think there's 5 in Fort Collins.
Okay.
Six districts. What's the difference between a district and a ward, real quick?
Terminology. Yeah. Precincts, it's just terminology. A ward is a geographical area defined where voters can elect a representative. It's 2 from each ward in Loveland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the mayor is elected across the city. The mayor has a 2-year term. Council members, councilmen or women, have 4-year terms. So you're every 2 years you got 4 people, or actually 5 people for election out of the 9 that serve in city council. So I joined in 2015, and generally what people ask up front is, why did you do that? You were working, you were busy for 6 years. Your golf game wasn't that great, and you're supposed to be you're working hard. You're pretty productive. Why would you want to start donating literally hundreds of hours a year to the community? And there's really not a salary; it's a stipend. I mean, I think I was getting $600 or $700. I mean, it's like $600 a month. I think as mayor pro tem, I think I got $800 a month, and the mayor got $1,000. Recently, that's changed a bit, but literally, you're working, you're donating. And my business belief is there's no such thing as free consulting. If you're going to give advice, there has to be value to it, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's quantitative or qualitative. But anyway, I did that because I had a passion for organizational development, for companies to run well, businesses to prosper and do well. And I saw 2 things back in 2015. I saw a city staff that was struggling at times because council would establish direction and set policy. And there were some real challenges in the city at that time that caught my attention. And then the other aspect was just the business community. I was shocked when I moved into Loveland in 2006, and about a month later, I finally found downtown. And it was a shock. I said, oh my goodness, I have made a huge mistake. What did I do? This is a dying town. What I had seen is I bought a house out on Boyd Lake. I saw Centera Marketplace off at 34, where I referred to earlier. Then I saw the Centera development, and I saw things happening. I said, that's pretty cool. I like this. But when I saw downtown, it was a shock. And I said, something has to be done here because I grew up in a small town, a very small town, 5,000 people when I was born and 18,000 when I graduated high school. Now it's like 200, but that's another story. And I had owned a drugstore, a pharmacy, my wife and I, in a small town of several thousand people. And that's just my roots. It's the way you take care of people. Things are important. And I saw some real needs. And so I ran in 2015 and won that election. That's kind of how I got started and why.
Interesting. I remember growing up here, Patrick. I don't remember downtown Loveland.
That's a fair length on as a mayor pro tem. And then you ran for mayor this last go around, and it didn't necessarily go your way. But what was the motivation to run for mayor at that time? I mean, it's a 2-year term, 2-year commitment. You've already volunteered, donated your time for the last decade, but clearly you saw a need for it. What was kind of that need that you saw at present day? Well,
I first ran for mayor in 2019. I have to track the years here. This is 23 year in, and then we're kind of 21. Yeah, 21, excuse me, 2021. And the 2-year terms, and I lost by 187 votes out of 25,000 votes.
Oh.
Unfortunately, less than 50% of the registered voters in Loveland voted. And 187 votes is not a lot of votes, but it's so all you need is one by one. And I reran last year, 2023. And the reason I ran the first time was I truly believe that we had really failed leadership at the center chair. There's 9 votes on council. The mayor is only 1, but there's a great deal of influence. And I had already been serving for 2 years as mayor pro tem. That's why I started in 2019 as mayor pro tem. And that mayor pro tem is elected by your peers, your council, to serve in the absence of the mayor. But I saw failed leadership. I didn't see ideas coming forward from the current mayor, who was mayor then. She was in her third term. The first election in 21 would have been, my first election for mayor would have been running for her third term. And I didn't see solutions coming forward. Some people are really excellent at pointing out problems. I've never been interested in people who are complain, have a problem, but they don't have a solid solution, or at least a workable solution you could discuss. It reminds me of the Marx Brothers film. I think it was called Horse Feathers. And Groucho does this little dance. He's a college professor. And the song is, I'm against it. Whatever it is, I'm against it. And he does this little dance. And it's pretty funny, even though it's like almost 90 years old now. And that's what it really felt like. We had pretty much an 8-1 council or a 7-2 council on major items, especially items of development and business growth. And it was just getting tiring. So that's why I ran that particular term or year. When I ran in 2023, I had no intention of running that year. That entire summer, my wife and I had chatted, and that would have been my 8th year in council. I'd be have completed 2 terms that I was elected to as a council member from my ward, and felt that was enough. I mean, 8 years, that was like 10% of my Tuesday nights of my life. And I had added it up over nearly 8,000 hours in 8 years I gave to the city, meetings and participations and things of that nature. That's a lot of time. And I felt it was time to step aside. But I guess the next question is what changed your mind, Don?
What changed your mind?
Well, some citizens came to me and I saw what was happening again as far as candidates coming forward. And I said, this is not going to work out well. And I agreed. And then I agreed to run again. And they agreed to support me and do the work and so forth. And we ended up with a 3-party race, and those things don't end well. incumbent certainly has an advantage then. And some promises were made that weren't kept, but that's water under the bridge or over the dam, as they say. So it's just time to move on.
Mm.
So you're no longer in city council, but
Correct.
having that relationship and touch point, you probably never leave necessarily. You're probably very much engaged and watching from the outside. And there's some big decisions being made. Some talk to us a little bit about the repeal of the 3% grocery and how that impacts the budget for Loveland.
Yeah, thank you. That was one of the major issues as to why I ran. When you talk about issues, it was we had to deal with that issue. We're also dealing with a strong, and we can come back to this later, kind of an anti-growth sentiment that's been here forever. It was really strong back around 2004, and it's kind of picked up steam again. But we'll get back to the tax issue. I don't think anyone here likes to pay sales tax, income tax, property tax. I mean, I don't think any of us enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
And so my concern, and it was a serious concern that's now showing to be true, was that a proposal had come forward from citizens to remove 3% tax on grocery items, sales tax on groceries. And that's fine. I mean, I'm all in favor of that, having a right to vote on that. And if that happens, that's great. I mean, it's like $150 a person, and to some people that's a lot. I think on principle, it's stronger. Nobody likes to pay tax.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is that the citizen group and the drivers of the initiative, including the mayor and other leaders in the community, refused to acknowledge that a 3% reduction, removing that sales tax, was going to create a 16% gap in the budget. And there was no plan to either reduce the budget, which we approved in November prior to the election, or to find alternative sources of revenue to replace that. You have to do something.
Right. Yeah.
But instead, the mayor spent a great deal of time arguing with the CFO, who is extremely competent. I've had 5 CFOs in my life, and working with Brian Wotus, the city CFO, was a true pleasure. He is a real professional and not only knows his numbers. This gentleman and his entire budget department are great communicators. But people live in denial. I thought denial was a river in Fort Collins, but it turns out that there's a lot of denial in Loveland as well.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and so even though we would try to highlight throughout the year that, hey, listen, we're going to have this gap, and here's what's going to happen. So we either got to adjust the budget now, or develop an alternative budget that's sitting there in case the tax pass. We could then pass it, and that would adjust the revenue and the expenses out of the gate, be done. But people saw that as many as, well, you're election interfering, you're painting a worst case scenario picture, and eventually they had the election, and now they have a real problem.
How is
They're
that?
They're going to run about $13 million short this year.
How is that problem surfacing, and what implications is that kind of going to have on Loveland, that how you see it, at least? Well,
already cuts have been made. They're working off of a reserve fund that was set up as an emergency reserve fund. So, like we had the flood back in, was it 2012? The city had reserves that could immediately start work, and then the federal government, anytime from 5 to 10 years later, they eventually repay you for that work. But we had the money to do it, unlike other communities like just south of us that didn't have the funds. So we've already seen significant reductions in our public safety and fire, and in police. Our police department is now understaffed once again. That was a problem we had in 2015, and we fixed it over the next several years. So now we're, again, understaffed. It means overtime and lack of coverage. So that's an area. They're talking about additional cuts to balance the budget. They can squeak through this year, but the real challenge is going to be what happens next year. Because that gap, 13 to 15 million, inflation costs are going up. And it's funny, the things the city buys stuff like construction materials. We know what's happened to construction materials. You're in a home, yeah, you're in a home building industry.
Yeah.
So it's going to have a significant impact on the services the citizens receive. That's just reality. They're seeing it now. And of course, here's an interesting thing. People say, well, tighten the budget. Well, okay, we've been tightening it. We started tightening it a couple of years ago when we saw that Loveland was operating in the lowest sales tax rate in Northern Colorado, 3%. The effective rate now with the food tax removed means Loveland's collecting 2.5% on sales, retail sales.
Mhm.
In the general fund, your sales tax is a primary funding mechanism for a city in Colorado. The county gets its money from real estate property taxes. The state, they get their pound of flesh from income tax, and they got some sales tax, and they get it everywhere.
Mhm.
But cities are primarily funded on sales tax. So not only were we the lowest before, now we're way below, and we're a full service.
So what did you say the effective sales tax is for Loveland?
2.5% now, or is it low? 2.5%.
Yeah, it's at 3% rate, but we're not taxing
At that actual rate
on food. We're taxing those sales at 0 and everything else at 3%. So cumulative rate on retail sales, which is what you collect sales tax on, is 2.5%.
So for comparison's sakes, Timnath has a 3% city sales tax rate. Windsor has a 3.65% city sales tax rate. And Fort Collins, now after their 0.5% increase, is at 4.35% increase.
Oh,
Right, just sales tax. And Loveland's at 3, but we're not taxing food.
That's a big gap. That's a huge gap. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 16% of our. It was around a 16% reduction in the general fund.
Why do you think Timnath is so flush with cash? Because Costco has moved in and just absolutely skyrocketed some of those tax dollars.
And look at the services the city of Timnath provides. I mean, it's a very small city in comparison to Fort Collins,
right?
Loveland. So Loveland's been doing extremely well. It's been in the past very conservative in its fiscal plan, and to be able to get by since 1984 at 3%, means we've kept the expansion of services and growth has kept pace. Has been able to be held at that same rate because growth has come in, and so you're taxing a bigger number. But we've been able to hold that rate since 1984. And the city has grown significantly since 1984. We're now around 80,000 citizens.
Don, that's fascinating. Patrick, I'm glad you had those numbers. That's really interesting to compare Timnath, Fort Collins. Don, we real quick before we move on, we've interviewed the mayor of Fort Collins, the mayor of Timnath. How is the relationship with Loveland with these different government bodies? Is there open communication with Fort Collins, Loveland, Berthoud? What is that like within the Loveland circle?
Yeah, and I would include Greeley in that.
Okay.
I can speak from my experience when I was serving on council starting in 2015, and up until the time I'm off, I'm thinking of the relationships with Windsor, Greeley, and Fort Collins have been very good under Mayor Troxel. The relationship, I was Mayor Pro Tem, so I interacted with him quite a bit and served on the airport commission with him. It was very good. Mayor Arndt came on board, and I worked with her, and we had a lot of fun together. We did some interviews out at the airport, and they thought we were going to be contentious because money was involved in two cities. And I think we opened out with two people. We're both about the same height, We both gave high fives. And,
exclude Patrick from this conversation. All three of us see eye to eye. That's good.
Mayor Arndt and I got along really, really well. As far as working with the cities, I can't say that relationship's in place with our existing mayor. or had it been, but I was able to fill that gap with Mayor Gates out of Greeley, Mayor Rennemeyer out of Windsor, and then in particular with Mayor Arndt and Mayor Troxel out of Fort Collins. And the councils work fairly well together, I would say, up until COVID. And then things, just because of lack of familiarity and the lack of contact, fell apart a little bit. And I think right now they're very different councils.
Don, you mentioned the airport. Let's talk about the airport real quick and your experience on that board. Man, we all would love to start flying out of Fort Collins Loveland Airport to go to Chicago, to go to LA. What is the latest on the Fort Collins Airport, or what can you share?
No, this is great. I don't think things have changed much. When I was appointed to the airport in 2019 as a representative from Loveland City Council, and that had to be the most rewarding, but the most difficult board and responsibilities to get your arms around. It's unlike the airport commission. It's unlike any other boards or commissions that I've been on in the past or currently serve on. And I serve on a couple now. And the primary reason for that is the governance model. You have two cities that own an asset that really doesn't bring in much revenue, but it has extremely high capital needs. So where's the funding come from? And it comes from the federal government and the state. So guess who really is the power in the governing agency?
Not Fort Collins and Loveland.
Not Fort Collins and Loveland. You know, I might get a mortgage from you. You said you're
that's right. I'll give you a good deal. I'll give you a good deal. You'll be friends and family.
And so they call the shots. And then so now you're managing the day-to-day, and you know, maintenance and ongoing operations. You're responsible for that, and you develop plans and make recommendations, because to me, the airport is a regional airport. It's a real economic driver for Northern Colorado in many, many ways. Corporate headquarters are here, and they like to be able to get in and out and not have to go through all the rigmarole you would in Chicago or Denver or places like that. So there's that model of business that is local aviation, which is small, but it's very vocal in the community, but it's not an economic driver per se. Then you have the commercial, and you have the corporate, you call it travel, and then you have the regular air travel you and I get on and fly to a vacation. And the FAA is in charge of all that. And that's where the money comes from. So the lead time and planning is long. So here's what I know. The runway needs to be widened.
Not lengthened, but widened?
Widened. It's long enough, but to go up a level in service with the crosswinds that we have, and the type of planes, meaning 737s and Airbuses, 300s. We're not talking 757s or 777s or whatever. It changes. All the numbers are changing. But the regular commercial, things that Southwest flies, the things that United flies in America, day in and day out. The FAA mandated the runway has to be widened, and they're going to fund it. And now that work was supposed to be starting now, and it'd be completed in about a year. It's now going to start in, I think it's 2025 or 2026 completion.
What's the price tag on that? Do we know? The widen that? How much money are they giving? I'm curious.
I'm trying to recall the number. I want to say it's 15 million, because I know the terminal was 20 million.
Okay.
So there were three things needed. I refer to the airport as a jigsaw puzzle. You get three key pieces. You got to put those key pieces in with everything else for the puzzle to be complete. But there's always those key pieces in a puzzle. If you don't get them, nothing else makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. It's like moving out of blue sky into the building or something. And they're critical. Well, widening is critical, and it's mandated by the FAA. And they're funding it. Most funding is about 90%, and local has to come up with 10%. Sometimes the state comes in with some, The community comes in with some and they save money. We try to keep the costs down so you can build a capital fund. The second piece another piece that's necessary was a terminal facility. And people wonder why do you need a terminal when you don't have a carrier? Well, if you don't have a carrier, you don't need a terminal. But if you don't have a terminal, you don't get a carrier. So
You're not going to get the carrier.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because of security. We were operating out of what we referred to as a double wide trailer. We had an A&W stand out there and called it an airport. Well, it's pretty tough to attract the carriers, regardless of the other economic factors, when it looks like you're really not serious.
Right.
So Wade Troxel in particular, and Darren Atterbury was city manager of Fort Collins at the time. It was great working with them and the other members of the commission, and we were able to get that terminal need moved up and start on design work in the hope that we could get the funding. Well, COVID hit, wheels fell off, but here's the good news. The FAA provided funding, and they provided funding to 100% level, and it was for the terminal and all the infrastructure, everything that goes with that parking lot, all that. So we were given like $20 million. I'm rounding that number. It's probably changed a little bit, probably 21 something, but say $20 million. So we put that terminal piece, locked it in. We already knew we had the widening project locked in and they would fund it, but we knew it was going to be in like 24 or 25. And I think that timetable slipped out a year.
Okay.
So we had those two pieces now, and the terminal will be completed at the end of the summer.
That's great. End of the summer. Terminal.
Right in the summer.
I did not know that.
Size, 2 gates, so expandable. So we initially had 6 gates, and over time with the funding and all that condensed it down to 2 gates, meet the next need for the next 10, 15 years. 2 gates is a lot of gates.
Yeah.
Better than no gates.
Better than no gates.
I mean, this is positive news, Don.
Yeah,
I like this.
really
I feel
good.
like the third is the tower.
You'd be surprised at the people that complain about the terminal. Why are you spending money on that? And why are you widening the runway? We ought to have another one. Everybody's got an opinion, and no one's coming up with the money except the government. And the government tells you what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. Okay, they let you decide a little bit how you're going to do it. They tell you there's reason for that. I mean, I think it's good in aviation.
Yeah.
Third piece of the puzzle. This was a hot topic, and now it's gotten quiet, but it'll come back. Is traffic control tower.
Right. That's what I've always heard. That seems to be in the
now
news.
we're deep in the weeds with politics coming out of DC. The FAA has been operating until recently without a permanent director of the FAA throughout the entire Biden administration, and I think 1 year of Trump. And we just finally got the Congress has finally just approved someone last fall. Yeah. So he's new on the job. So the FAA was and the state of Colorado, CDOT, Aeronautics Division, and the FAA were funding the remote tower. Now, that sounds a virtual tower, pretty sci-fi like, but they're already in existence. They're in existence and operating, for instance, in London, or outside of London at a regional airport. Working great. The same provider that did the one for England, Great Britain, it was our provider working here in the United States. Well, the government refused to pay him. And they then decided with all the changes, they can make a change like every year. Bureaucracy is like, we want this, we want that, we want this. And they finally said, we're not going to do any more work till we get paid. And they said, well, we're not going to pay you until you get all this other work done. So the vendors said, we're done. So now the government FAA found another vendor, just have no political ramifications of vendor selection, of course.
So what it sounds like
now that's back on, and it will happen. It will happen, Chris and Patrick. It will happen because they need this airport.
Yeah,
no airport. They selected. Why not Wyoming? Well, Cheyenne, right?
Yeah.
Is it ever windy in Cheyenne?
No one listens to this from Cheyenne, so you can
You
just
got to
go
drive
hard.
up there and
You can
find
bash
out.
Cheyenne all you want. No, we love Wyoming. We love Wyoming.
And where is the growth right now? Northern Colorado between Loveland, Greeley, and Fort Collins.
Crazy.
It's crazy. It's 1 million now. It's going to be 2.5 million shortly. And by 2030, the numbers become, even more astronomical. So there's a lot of reason here for the FAA's commitment to Northern Colorado Regional Airport.
I think that it's
really long answer, but trust me.
I think it's semi-breaking news. I didn't, at the runways on plan, the terminal is going to be done this year, and then it sounds like the
It's
virtual
going to get
tower,
resolved.
it'll get resolved.
Yeah, and
when those three things get resolved, do you suspect we will have a commercial airline that is a permanent fixture to Northern Colorado?
I do. That's an opinion, but based upon discussions and just information over the last 8 years and conversations with representatives out in DC with the FAA, there's political support within the state, so the pieces are lining up, and I think
I'll just be
kind of mess things up, but I think
so
it will
huge.
be just a reality.
Yeah, we had family that lived outside of LA, about an hour and a half, and we could take the FNL airport, fly that to Burbank, and it cut like 3 hours out of the travel time. And we only got to take it twice, I think. We only got to use it twice before it shut down. And we were just so depressed. We were like, man, it was 12 minutes from my door to the parking lot.
Was that Allegiant, Patrick? Was that
was
Allegiant?
Avelo.
Avelo, okay.
Yeah. I think, marketplace is always changing.
Mm-hmm.
Just because something was always one way for 30 years doesn't mean it's going to stay that way for another 3.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a young child, O'Hare was nothing. It was a cornfield, and then it was Midway. And now look at O'Hare Airport. Well, but things change, and now the trend is downsizing and convenience and time saving because of the cost involved. So there's a lot of drivers for that. We're talking pilotless airplanes. We're talking electric airplanes. Whoever would have thought that, right? But our grandparents couldn't even envision airplanes. So,
let's get this runway widened first in this terminal built in this virtual tower, and then we'll start throwing up electric airplanes.
Yeah, I think the drivers are there, and that's going to be a benefit.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Don, we could literally
really long answer. But
no.
I want to
important.
sneak one question in before you wrap this up, Chris. Centerra South.
Yes.
Is that going forward? And is there going to be a Whole Foods and grocery there that Loveland over in that area desperately needs?
Yes.
Okay.
In 2000, when I first moved out here, where I'm living, this side of town, people kind of complained about a grocery store rather than driving into central Loveland. Why, when we get one out here and it's all matter of rooftops, we hit that number a long time ago.
Yeah.
Thanks to the McQueenie Group and the developments that they have been putting in from Denver Avenue and Loveland East, we're at that threshold. Matter of fact, we're talking 2 grocery stores now. Centerra South is a reality. That is the most memorable project that I worked on. I spent an entire year on a subgroup with city staff, the developer staff, and all the consultants, and then myself and Councilor Olson were 2 representatives from the city council that worked in that group, and that is a legacy project.
Yeah.
Whole Foods is in. King Soopers is working to move into the next area just to the east of that. It's called Schmear Farms. It's still on this side of I-25.
Schmear
Farms.
And just so everybody knows, this is on Highway 34 south of Highway 34. Okay.
Right.
And I-25.
So just west of I-25
Okay.
at Schmear Farms. And then comes the Centerra South development.
Okay.
And in that project, the McQueenie project, if that didn't happen, the next one could not happen. It's the infrastructure running it out that far. And we actually have to put a lift station in for waste product. So you know what I'm talking about. Because we got to pump it up the hill I-25 up into Loveland, into treatment. And so without that URA, and
That sounds cheap.
It's $185 million of infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's a $1 billion plus project.
Oof.
Corporate headquarters for Hensel Phelps is going to be located in Loveland. Whole Foods will be there. King Soopers will be, it appears, working on that now, to the east of the Centerra development.
Don, is that a 3 to 5 year plan, or what is the time frame?
Yeah, it's
3 to 5. Okay.
Yeah, they'll be great breaking ground. They'll be going bonding this fall.
Okay.
So they're ready to break ground and start digging. They got to do the bonding, the first wave. It's a 3-phase project.
Okay.
And the King Soopers one is related to that, and so that'll follow. Probably it'd be a year or two behind the Whole Foods, probably.
Okay.
Well, I remember driving past Centerra when it was being built when I was in high school, and we were just like, what is this shopping center area? Like in the middle of nowhere. And if you could only see what it is today versus then, is just incredible. So Centerra South will come, and in 10 years, we're going to be looking at it, and that entire area is just going to transform.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. The battle around all the development, and Fort Collins is going through this, is financing. And when you ask, what's it like sitting in city council, and what's it like working with the public? I think the biggest disappointment that we have is that our own learning curves are never as fast as we'd like them to be. Even though, I had 40 years of business experience working in corporate America, publicly traded company. I thought I had a pretty good grasp of economics, turn businesses around. These are big dollars, and the money coming from local communities, it's really tough to get. The infrastructure cost far exceed the capacity of a local city just to pay for it and wait for sales tax to collect up. Mm-hmm. You just don't have $185 million to put in water and sewer and streets that the city eventually owns. Right. So it's a financing mechanism.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to argue about how to do it. Well, until someone comes up, you can be against something, but until you have a proposal and a workable plan of how are you going to finance this, you're wasting time. And the real issue is some people really don't want a solution.
Sure.
There's that anti-growth element in all our communities. It's always there for hundreds of years, but now it's really, and they just find reasons to say no.
That's a tough side to be on right now. Yeah.
They want what they want, but they don't want to agree on how to pay for it.
Yeah. They really like going to shop at Costco, but only if it's them.
Yeah. Only if they're the only one in the store. That's right. Yeah.
And I don't have to wait in line. Yeah.
Don, you are the best, buddy. I'm this was awesome. Like that, your take on just how stuff gets done in Northern Colorado. Like that's why we wanted you to come on, and that breakdown of the airport was awesome. I didn't know a lot about that. And just the sales tax thing, that was very interesting, Patrick. I didn't realize those numbers were so drastic. But anyways, with all that being said, we're going to wrap up real quick, Don. When we wrap up, I know you love beer because I've had a lot of beer with you before. And we always ask all our guests, Fort Collins, Loveland, there's a ton of microbrews. Verboten just moved up to Fort Collins, by the way. We were over there the other day. Summer afternoon, Friday, Don, what local watering hole establishment do you like to go to for a cold drink, cold beer?
Whichever one your wife will join us at.
Well, yeah.
And Patrick, you as well, but I know Chelsea, so.
I appreciate that answer. I like that.
Good answer. I like that. Chelsea will appreciate that.
I always let Chelsea pick, And
listen, she runs the show.
And you have to bring the little guy, too.
I'll bring the little man. Well, Don, thanks again. We can't thank you enough, buddy. Thanks so much.
Patrick, thank you both. Thanks, Chris.
Take care.
Yep.
Friends of the podcast, thank you so much as always for tuning in. We thank you so much for your support. And just so you know, my amazing co-host Patrick Soukup over there, he is the founder, started Soukup Real Estate. If you ever need any questions about buying or selling or just want a market report on your existing home, reach out to Patrick. His team is absolutely fantastic. born and raised in Fort Collins. His information is right there on the page. Strongly recommend reaching out.
And same for you, Chris. As if you guys are looking at buying or refinancing a home here in Northern Colorado, there's nobody better to reach out to than the Murphy Whitlock Group. And Chris Murphy is going to take incredible care of you. So do not hesitate to reach out, ask questions. He is in no rush, no hurry. So give him a chance. And I think he's going to do a great job for you. Thank you for watching.